Can you say hard hats, folks? Hard hats, lunch pail, steel toe boots?
Anything short of a championship this year is a failure. Look at this boomer right here.
You've just got so much talent here.
Somebody said we need to apologize for Jalen.
Can I close it, John? What are we apologizing for? What did we say? What did we do?
Hey, Barry Manning here. Welcome to a Friday edition of the Garden Report. Celtics back in action tomorrow against the Sixers. And we'll get to see more of the guys we saw in Abu Dhabi and hopefully Al Horford, who Joe Mazzulla talked about, his status, his outlook for preseason, even for the regular season, a little bit of practice yesterday. Noa Dalzell here. She was at practice today. So we'll get into that and some other stuff here. Brief check-in edition with some stuff happened at practice over the last few days that I wanted to get into here. And look ahead to some of the games that are going on. First appearance at TD Garden for the Celtics since their championship parade. And I think everybody looking forward to seeing what they're going to look like against Philly if Philly's willing to play some of their regulars here. We are brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to Prize Picks right now. Great time heading into the weekend. College games going to be going on tonight. You got pro games going on Sunday, and it's the best place to get real money sports action with 10 million members, billions in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, and it's just a great overall experience because, let's face it, your fantasy team, full season fantasy team is probably going off the rails right now. I know mine is. In one of my leagues, injury strike. There's no way around that. I know everybody's got McCaffrey out who took him one, but on Prize Picks, you can draft a new team each week heading into these games and get injury insurance so your team stays in play even if someone goes down in the first half. So again, just pick two or more players, pick more or less on their stat projections, and if they convert on that, you win. That's Prize Picks. CLNS right now gets you $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. Prize Picks right now, CLNS. Pick $5 lineup and get 50 instantly. Prize Picks. Run your game. Love it over there. Check it out. So, Noah, Joe Mazzulla asked about Al Horford's preseason status. He didn't play in the Abu Dhabi games. We'll sit some more in the next three. Obviously, 3 games coming up in 4 days. So they're being careful with him. They're ramping him up. And that carefulness could extend in the regular season, at least according to what he said here.
Just ramping him up. We're still talking about that. He'll definitely play in one of them, maybe 2. Just kind of ramping him up and making sure he stays sharp. That's all.
Is there a thought to maybe keeping him off the bench, starting in that interim before Porzingis gets back?
Yeah, they're still to doing whatever makes sense for the team. Obviously he's been great for us, both coming off the bench and starting. And so we just have to make a decision, whatever we think is best for the team at the time that we'll do. And to credit to him that he's open-minded enough to know that, he'll just do whatever's best for the team.
So pretty ambiguous there. Could be nothing. Did stand out to me, though, a little bit. The thought that maybe you go with Luke Kornet at center here. And I'm surprised I didn't come up with that. Corrales did. But it's not far-fetched. Horford played off the bench mostly last year. There's going to probably need to be even more load management this season, given the minutes he played last handful of playoff runs. He's 38. He looked pretty good in that second unit role last year once he got used to it. And since that's where he's going to probably end up anyway, once Porzingis comes back, I guess it could make some sense. Kornet looked pretty good with the starters out there. Looks like he's going to take a step this year from the Will we saw in those 2 preseason games. And I think he's just a good guy to fit in limited minutes with that group. And maybe there's some matchup issues here or there. I know Joe in that cut there talked about maybe going back and forth between different looks. I have a tough time thinking it's actually going to happen. But how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they do any Al Horford off the bench, it's not because I don't think that the starting lineup would be better with him, because I think that starting lineup was so good in the playoffs last year with him anchoring the defense. I think it's just looking at the context, like you want to think long term. And I don't know that it's going to be exclusive to just Al Horford, this mentality of like maybe sacrificing regular season wins in the name of longevity and in ensuring that guys are going to be ready to go in April, May, and June. And so Al's going to be 1 year older. I think we haven't really seen a drop off from him where he's no longer contributing at a really high level. I think he's one of the reasons they won the championship last year. But if it means, Luke starts sometimes, maybe they try Xavier Tillman in there. I think Tatum doesn't love being the 5, but they can throw that in there as well. But just limiting, he's not going to be playing 35 minutes, 30 minutes a night during the regular season. And if you're looking at Porzingis being out for a while, like that's certainly going to be, that's going to mean that other guys are going to step up and play more. So whether or not he actually starts, like I think the jury's out. I don't know if to make too much of that Joe Mazzulla clip, but I could certainly see him being moved to the bench just to save his legs.
Yeah, I think it's more how they used him in Abu Dhabi than the clip there. Any comments he made there. He looked good with the starters. That's the biggest thing is the movement, the way he pulled defenders away from even Tatum and Brown at different times. I've always said the screening game with him is so good. And then maybe you get a boost on the offensive glass as well. The downside, I guess, is going against a Warriors team, some other teams that are more 5 out. Knicks on opening night would be a challenge as well. It's tougher to play him in those spots. But at the same time, the alternative is having Horford out there playing big minutes, switching on the perimeter. And I guess you could drop him back to try to take the load off him. But I think the biggest reason you would do it is because Horford's going to have to be out in some of these games anyway. Those nights you'll have to start Luke. So you're not going back and forth as much if you're starting Luke right from the start rather than going with Horford. And I think the other thing to take consideration of here is that Horford and Tillman looked pretty good last year. And this team's probably better suited to playing big than playing small. I don't think you're going to see like a Springer Walsh kind of thing like we've kicked around. It's more likely I think you'll see some Horford Tillman minutes that were really good last year, numbers wise. And that is easier to do if you bring Horford off the bench rather than keeping him out there for a second stint with Tillman. And I don't know if Tillman's going to play every night either here, but as I start to think about, like, again, I'm like, oh man, why didn't I come up with this? And I'm not 1,000% sure it's the best move, but it's pretty creative because if Horford's coming off the bench, that just naturally scales back his minutes.
Yeah, definitely. And the funny thing is, I remember last year, like, it was very clear that Horford wanted to still be a starter at the beginning of the year. And then, there's this famous story of Tatum getting everybody together and having the conversation, and they collectively decided that, he was going to be the odd man out of the starting lineup. But then obviously really excelled in that role. And I think the fact that they preserved his minutes during the year paid off in the long term, because when they needed him in the playoffs, he was ready and he was shooting at a good clip and he was defending, and, he really wasn't a liability at all. And so I could see a world where they're like, we don't want to, we want to follow that same blueprint as last year's. And last year it was not, it was a choice. He could have started, right? I don't even remember we realistically thought that somebody else was going to come off the bench, if it was Drew or Derek, because now in hindsight, it makes so much more sense for Al too. But I think that they're probably having the conversation of like, it worked last year with him resting during the year, not overplaying. And we're not going to have that same luxury now because Porzingis is like definitively out. So maybe we can, pull in Luke or somebody else that can eat some of those minutes. So I get how they landed there. And actually, like, the more even just talking it out, like, it makes a lot of sense. And at the end of the day, like, I think it's, Al Horford, they're going to really need him. Like, that's the way this team is constructed. And so you never know what, this is the year where he starts to feel some of those pains of getting older or gets an injury or whatever. And then that's, we thought about that all playoffs. Like, it would have been a disaster if he had gotten hurt.
Would you do it? Start Kornet?
But I mean, you could give it a try too. That's the thing. It's like they have 82 games for a reason, right? Like, you could start him off of the bat, see how that goes. See if what they're giving up defensively, what they're giving up offensively, see a larger sample size. I mean, it wasn't, I have to look at the lineup data, but I don't think that Luke played with the other 4 starters very much last year. And so if you give it a shot and it works, then like, there you go. Al can keep coming off the bench and save his legs and, kind of solves that problem. And then if it doesn't work, there, you probably didn't sacrifice too much with it. So that's the beauty of the long season. And I think maybe even tomorrow we'll see a little bit more of it just to see how they fare against different lineups. And I think it's probably why they ran with it in Abu Dhabi. It was just to give it a chance too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he's in a good position to do it at this point. So it is worth a try. He looks stronger. Defensively, it seems like he can get on the perimeter just a little bit more than he could in the past. The rebounding's come along, 11 in that first game. So I think it's just a good time for him. Now, he's prone to getting hurt too. And the idea that you would go back and forth a bunch with this doesn't seem to be their style. I think they like having one lineup and going with. They always talk about, oh, maybe we could have different lineups and go a bunch of different ways with it. And that was a big talk going in the last year too, right? But that's not what happened. I remember this talk 2 years ago too, vaguely, because Rob was coming off surgery, I think, or something like that, and they were gonna go with Kornet maybe in a starting role, or they had him in like a scrimmage at starter. So it started being a conversation like, oh, could you go with Luke to take the burden off? It was almost the same exact conversation, except it was just off a scrimmage. And Kornet ended up getting hurt, if I remember right. So they brought in Blake. So this was, 2 years, last year, 2 years ago. And Blake ended up getting into the mix a little bit on nights where Horford sat, and Horford ended up starting for the most part that year, and nothing became of it. So this could be the exact same scenario. The difference this time, though, is that Luke's healthy going into the year. So that's a big thing. And I don't know. It still feels like that's not the most likely thing that's going to happen here. But I like the idea. I like that it moves Horford to a smaller role, because my biggest fear still is that they're going to lean on him too much during this absence period for Porzingis. And this is a natural way to scale him back a bit in rotation.
Yeah, I think honestly, like at the end of the day, I don't think they'll go back and forth, but so much could happen as far as injuries go, as far as guys' plays go. Part of what I think is being insinuated here is that whereas some players spent all summer working on their game, like I get the feeling that Horford really rested most of the summer. And so I think he's still just trying to work back into like real NBA game shape. And so part of it could just be that. I mean, Joe mentioned like we're ramping him up. So, I think there's, he was probably getting shots up and things, but he wasn't, he was resting his legs over the summer, whereas other guys weren't. So, maybe they're going to continue to scale him up and he'll be ready to go and ready to start. So I don't know. I always find the starting lineup stuff to be kind of a moot point, because ultimately like the goal is to get Porzingis in that starting lineup and to work off of that. And I think that in the playoffs, if Porzingis was hurt again, they would run it back with Al as the starter. So it's really a question of like, how much do you rely on Luke to eat minutes during the regular season? And I think last year he showed that he's quite good at that role. So whether it's at the beginning or it's later on, like Luke can reliably play during the regular season. And I think another question is like, where does Xavier Tillman fit in? And does he fit in above Luke or alongside, or does Luke still have kind of the upper hand? And a lot of it's going to come down to how well he can shoot too, because I think there's hope there that Xavier Tillman can stretch the floor and kind of give them that other option on offense. But it's not proven yet, right? It's more of a concept than a reality. So I think that's the only other thing to consider is like, does he potentially eat some of those minutes in a more substantial way than we saw last year?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt Luke has the upper hand, and it's the knowledge of the system, the versatility on defense. They can play him in different positions there. I love the way he fits in next to these guys offensively. That tape in Abu Dhabi was just so great to watch, of him passing the ball inside out. There was one play he slips by Jokic and gets an and one. He didn't shoot amazing at 5 for 8. You'd probably like to see him put another basket or two in there. But he's just so in sync here and so much of a complimentary player. Like I can't get over the fact that for being a guy who's such a small threat to score, he still opens up so much space for other guys just with the way he moves and the positions he's able to pass from, and just the smart screens he sets. Now he can get an offensive rebound here or there. So I want to see this. I want to see what it looks like. I'm sure we will in these next handful of preseason games, because as you mentioned with Al, and that was something that stuck out to me at Media Day, he's not really there yet. And I think he said as much. Like, I'm still ramping up. The summer was short. That impacted me a little bit. And is he going to be 1,000% ready for the start of the season? I don't know. And some of it comes back to the minutes he's played the last handful of years. And it's kind of crazy to look at. 2,315 last year between regular season and playoffs, 2,539 in in 2023. So he played even more without going to the finals. And then 2,820 the year they went to the finals in 2022. So that's 7,600 minutes for Horford over the last 3 years here. And, was essentially the twilight of his career. So that combined with a short summer, maybe not a ton of activity, as you talked about, it's a tough position for him going into this year. And it might be a slow start for him. And that might transition from, let's say, a week or two where he's coming off the bench and playing small minutes into ramping him up. Because I remember Brad talked about in June, both sides of that being important, like reducing minutes, getting rest, but also playing enough minutes where you're ramped up to play big minutes eventually. And they're going to need him to play big minutes eventually, but it'll probably be in April, May, June.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this. I went on like a radio station in Maine yesterday, and they were asking like, what are the big stories out of camp? And I was like, is Al Horford going to start? Like, who's going to play the backup minutes? Like, there really has part of the challenge right now is like, and just thinking about this team is that it really is just the exact same team as last year, with just the question of like, are you even more cautious than you were last year about minutes and about rest? But they really were so cautious. Like, what I'm curious about is just how the conference starts to shape up as the season gets started. Like, if the Celtics are all of a sudden in the 3rd or 4th seed because other teams are all going on win streaks and they drop some easy ones, like maybe you start to think about, like, maybe I'm not going to go as hard in this whole like sacrificing regular season wins. I think we're used to them in this iteration of this team. Like, they had such a lead in the standings last year that almost like wins, like the regular season games all felt like they were for practice and you could rest whoever. And the number 1 seed was really never out of, never really, at risk. So that'll be another element as well. Like a few weeks, a few months into the season where all of a sudden, like maybe we do actually need to prioritize regular season wins because they're not at the standing. They're not at the spot where we might expect right now. Though it was interesting to see in the GM survey, just like how overwhelmingly teams, other teams' general managers believe this team is going to dominate and win the championship and be the number 1 seed. I think it was like all but one team, and I think it was the Celtics themselves, because they can't vote for themselves, that had the Celtics as the number 1 seed in the East. So that's our impression, but obviously that could all change quickly.
Yeah, for sure, especially with health, and that's going to swing things drastically here. And the Celtics are in a good spot right now with their complement of centers, even with Porzingis out. But things change if one more guy goes down for any amount of time here. And I think that's another reason you have to be ultra careful with Horford is you want him available consistently. You don't want him to miss any long stretch of time. So if having him sit out maybe even more than those back-to-backs early on is able to save him from any ailments, you got to do it. And I think that's something that they're going to do in the early going here. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And not so much the Joe comment there, but more utilizing Horford with those starters in both those games, not mixing that up all that much. And, going to Cade off the bench first, I thought was telling in the second game, using Tillman as much as they did. And the combinations too, getting those guys together shows, I think, how much they're going to have to utilize double big to get through some of their depth here to start this year. Some other notes from practice this week, and I know you were there today. I don't know if anything was too interesting, but continue to be on Jordan Walsh watch a little bit. Because he played some good minutes in those Abu Dhabi games. He was out there today playing with some of the Stay Ready crew guys. And, man, Lonnie Walker being on that Peterson, Dimitrov, Skapintsev team doesn't bode great for his stock, as we've talked about here. But Walsh, even though still obviously part of this group, still on the lower tier things, I asked Joe on what's today, Friday? I asked Joe yesterday if we could see more Walsh in Boston during the regular season, and said if it makes sense, we could do that. And still probably going to be main for him at the start of this year, but seems like Joe's pretty impressed by how he responded to the summer league, put him in a position to, play with the second unit there in those Abu Dhabi games. And he seems to be in a positive place too. I think he talked to Jay King yesterday in The Athletic, and they look back on the summer league thing that we talked about, his mindset going into that, all of that. And I don't know, part of me thinks that we could see a little bit of Walsh during this regular season, certainly more than last year, as he tries to fit into a role. And I guess you misspelled peak there, Noah.
Wait, you can see my tweet. Yeah. It's been a long day, man. It's been a long day. I had a 5 a.m. bus leaving New York. There's going to be a lot of typos for me today.
So more Walsh tomorrow. We're gonna see him more second unit.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're talking to Peyton about the preseason games. He's excited. He said he confirmed he'll be playing in both games. He offered up that information. I don't think we
I
suspected
don't think
otherwise.
Payton's ever gonna sit in his whole career.
Yeah, he was like, I know some guys aren't going to play both games, but I'm definitely playing both games. But I think guys like Jordan Walsh is going to be. This is my bread and butter. I'm excited for these 2 preseason games. I'm excited to watch Jordan and to watch Baylor Shireman and Jaden Springer, who I'm going to keep pushing the Jaden Springer agenda. Joe said he's been very impressed by his ball pressure, so that's.
You think we'll see him?
So we're thinking about the perimeter, right? Last year, they didn't really have opportunities for anybody below Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard because everybody was healthy, right? So like Drew Holiday had a couple ankle things, a couple games, but they really didn't miss any time. I'm expecting and I'm assuming that this year there will be some sort of guys missing time in that spot. Hopefully nothing substantial. And so who do you add to that mix below Pritchard and Hauser getting extended minutes, which I think you'll get? There's Jaden Springer, there's Baylor Shireman, and there's Jordan Walsh. Those are the 3 guys, potentially. And so Baylor's 24, really unproven. We have no idea how he looks in this league.
I thought it would be Baylor, but the early returns aren't great.
Jaden's 22, also limited, and then Jordan's 20, right? So, like, they're all have varying levels of experience in the NBA, but, like, their age and their basketball experience doesn't, like, align with that. So, between those 3 guys, like, who do I think right now is most ready for an NBA game? I would pick Jaden, but it's, I'm speculating. I don't know. Would you pick Jordan at this point of those 3? I think they all have a chance.
I like Jordan more because I think, as we saw in small bursts in those preseason games, he has the potential to play in the lane, screen, finish, grab offensive on the rim. And the tough part with him, we talked about him as a 3-and-D guy, is that 3-point percentage started to tick up a little bit in Maine last year. Then he comes out in these 2 games here and in the summer and is missing everything from 3. So that's the tough part. Yeah, Jordan. And Jaden. I thought
Jordan was okay from 3 in the 2 Abu Dhabi games.
2 of 6 in the first one, right? And 1 of 5 in the second one.
It was?
I want to say. We'll check that. But that would be 2 of 11 or 3 of 11. So not ideal. And teams aren't going to – the biggest thing, make or miss, is that teams just aren't going to respect his shot out there. And Jaden's too. And that's what limits both of those guys in terms of being able to play out there. So you got to put them in screening roles, play them close to the basket. And I think given that Springer is a smaller guard and Jordan's a bigger wing, I think he's in a better position to do that. Now, defense is a thing there too. I think Jaden's obviously further ahead of Walsh defensively, and that's the other area where you got to be up to speed to get on the floor there. But they would play O'Shea because of the offensive rebounding he could provide despite the lack of a shot. And he had some positional versatility like I think Walsh does here. So I think Walsh isn't going to replace O'Shea because O'Shea had a decently consistent role last year. But again, guy out, need a wing to step up. Maybe he'll be available in that position and they go to him and see what he looks like rather than last year, him just being in Maine the whole time like we talked about. Jaden, I don't know. I feel like he's in the Drew, Derek, Pritchard camp rather than a wing, especially without the shot.
I don't even mean wing. I mean just perimeter guys.
No, but if he could shoot, you'd be willing to talk about 3 guards given how good he is defensively. But I don't know if the shot's there with him.
Yeah, I mean, the shot we don't really know with any of those 3 guys right now. Like, I'm sure the Celtics have more data.
Even
on
Shireman.
Yeah, completely. We have no idea. Jordan, I mean, we have his main Celtics numbers. Then we have his summer league numbers. Jaden, again, I'll reiterate, we've seen him play like so infrequently since he got traded. A main Celtic game and a summer league game. So we can't really work with that either. I don't take stock in like taking 1 or 2 shots in a game, so we really haven't seen him have more comfortably kind of get shots up. So I think the thing for me right now,
he's 22 on 53 attempts right now.
53 attempts is nothing, like that means that just means so little to me. Like, that's over the course of multiple years. I think the reason I lean Jaden is just because this is going to be his 4th year in the NBA. And at the end of the day, like there's a lot of player development that goes on behind the scenes. And I think they're going to at least give him a chance to start because he's more in a now or never mode than a Jordan Walsh, who I don't think that him going to Maine this year for the most of the year is like that out of what the intended development plan was. So from talking to people around the team and just looking at years in the league here, I think like Jade is going to get a first look. But again, there's not really a look for anybody much, if everybody stays healthy. So we'll see. I mean, I think O'Shea and Svi were both guys that kind of flew under the radar because they didn't play a whole lot and, they didn't have an enormous opportunity, but they were reliable when they were called upon. And so that's kind of what you're looking for with these guys. And I think we'll continue to see like that'll be one of the main questions this weekend is of those three guys, like, are there certain ones that, stand out, does one stand out more than the others? After Summer League, I think Jaden looked to be above those guys. And then after the 2 Abu Dhabi games, Jordan kind of seemed to have the upper hand. So, we'll get a larger sample size, but I imagine that we see all three quite a bit.
Definitely. And that game's at 8:00. If you want to go, check out the Game Time app. The great deals over there right now. I don't know. You want to pull up some of the prices, Noah, and we'll share those with the people.
Game Time? Yeah,
I
actually just bought my dad and my brother tickets to opening night. Yesterday I bought them. I've been monitoring for a while. It's $350 to get in to the post fees and everything, which is a lot less than it was. Originally it was like $600. So
yeah, and that's the great part about Game Time. You can monitor it. You can keep an eye on it, even right up until game time. If you're in the area or live nearby, keep an eye on it.
It went way down. I swear it knows when I bought it, but yeah, it's $650 for 2 tickets now.
Yeah, that's the thing. You just got to keep an eye on it because it'll fluctuate. It'll change. I was looking at some of the concerts I went to this week, and I did go to Stevie Wonder last night. I should have waited. Should have waited right until concert time because they went so far down at concert time. It's a very tough ticket at first.
You just never know. You never know if that's what's going to happen.
You never know. But that's why Game Time, even after the show starts, even after the game starts, you can still go over there and get great deals. And with the code CLNS, you get $20 off your first purchase right now. Terms apply. And they do have a question that they're asking this weekend as we get into some college games here. Hypothetical. Would you, let's see, would you go to a wedding or college football? Who else is torn between celebrating a friend's big day and can't miss college football matchups on the 12th, which is tomorrow? Well, the average cost of attending a wedding, $650. Meanwhile, for diehard football fans, you could be snagging tickets to Oklahoma, Texas for $484, $663. Ohio State, Oregon football, normally $663, down to $279. And USC, Penn State, you can get in for $31. I'm going football. I don't know. It depends which friend. Maybe someone I don't know that much, someone I don't want to go. I'll pass, but if it was Syracuse football in particular, and I am going to Syracuse football thanks to Game Time end of November, it's obviously where I'd rather be. I don't know, Noah. Which sounds better to you?
I mean, I'm not going to skip someone's wedding for a college football game.
Yeah.
I don't watch football either. But if it's like someone I would go to their wedding. I've been to like so few weddings in my life also. So if it, like, to me, it's like it would be someone important to me. So it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to some weddings too. In a year from now, one of my close friends is getting married. So I wouldn't miss his. But certain ones, depending on the game, it depends. But 76% right here saying football. So I'm guessing that's a lot of big college fans. But look at those deals. $279 Ohio State, Oregon, USC right now, $31, Penn State. So yeah, there you go. And $20 off with CLNS. Use that code for your first purchase. Terms apply. So before we get out of here, game's 8:00 on Saturday, which is tomorrow. What are you looking forward to otherwise from this game? I don't know if we'll see Embiid, but that'll be interesting if it is Horford's debut. Those two going at it, see where Embiid's at and Horford's at physically. That'd be a good test against each other, but maybe they throw Horford into the more manageable matchup against Toronto there if Embiid is gone. But I think tomorrow is probably the night you're most likely to see Horford out there for what's, as Joe Mazzulla said, it's going to be one preseason game, maybe two here. So definitely could be some starters on hand. Celtic starters had a good week off here, a couple of ramp-up days. These were some shorter practices too, it felt like. So action in the games, activity, and live practice of what they're working on right now, I think, is the way they're going, at least based on how the Abu Dhabi games look. The starters played quite a bit in those games. So it'll be fun here. Sixers, Maxey looks bigger. He looks stronger, looks more able to survive out there. I'm interested to see how that looks. You're adding Paul George to the mix here. Is he going to play? We're going to get a sneak peek at what his fit is on that team. And then Yabusele coming back to town. I'm sure he's going to get a standing ovation when he enters. So a lot of fun stuff to watch from this game that many people feel like could be the East Finals this year.
Yeah, I think I was going to mention Yabusele is a fun one. I always like watching Peyton Pritchard play preseason basketball. I feel like it's just from a basketball standpoint, it's a fun experience. But yeah, just any insight we get on the rotation. I think that's the only thing that we can really think about right now is like just evaluating who's playing with who's playing well. Like I mentioned, between the perimeter guys who might step up and get some additional opportunities, but we're not going to learn anything super substantial from these two games. I think it's going to be a continuation of what we saw in Abu Dhabi, but just probably less minutes for the starters and more kind of going deeper down the bench. Maybe we'll even see like an Anton Watson, some of those guys that we've seen very little of.
They might still be in scrimmage mode from what we saw today and the minutes in those games. It's tough sledding for the Shireman and Walker fans right now. And since I'm a Shireman fan, I'm right there with the Walker fans, even though I had pessimism about Walker coming in. But I don't know if those guys are going to get out of the garbage time minutes there, unless they sit the starters down the stretch there. That's the opportunity. And that would probably be the case on Tuesday in Toronto. Who knows if the starters will even fly to that game. LeBron was complaining. He didn't want to go to Milwaukee.
Famously.
Yeah, and I doubt Celtics starters or the Celtics themselves will want their main guys going up to Toronto for that. Celtics had to leave the country twice this preseason, and LeBron's complaining about Milwaukee.
I know. That one's so viral. Everybody weighed in on that one. He was probably just being a little facetious, but it is kind of a funny. Like it's not that big of a deal to go to Milwaukee for a preseason game. It's kind of like everybody's doing it. I learned a little bit how they're scheduled, though. I think that opened the door on people sharing that actually the teams make their own schedules versus the NBA
for preseason.
Schedule. Yeah, I didn't realize that's how it worked. So I learned a little something because LeBron turned to the internet to complain, and everybody tried to dunk on him. So
Celtics Toronto, some love there because they're playing each other twice this preseason. It used to be Charlotte. I'm actually surprised they didn't do Charlotte this year with Lee and all that, but they'll see them pretty early in the schedule, so maybe that's why. But that's it for today. Not a ton from these practices. Pritchard doesn't like our video. I'm going to blame Rich for that one.
That was so funny. I was cracking up when he said that.
So you can check that out over on CLNS Media. Derek talked today. Joe, more on the Horford thing here. Again, if you missed it, Joe essentially said they're open to anything at center. Maybe a mix of starting roles there. I don't know what that means. Again, different times in the past, Hernan Gomez got into a preseason game. You're like, oh, is that a thing? Horford came off the bench that year when Ime started, and Horford just ended up starting that whole year. And then 22-23, Blake's in there, and Kornet scrimmaging with the starters, but Horford just ended up starting there too. And I think the easiest way to go is just to give Horford this spot. But there's a lot of merit, I think, to the Kornet idea, which credit to Corrales. He asked that question and got a pretty good answer there. So Horford's going to play in one or two of these games coming up after sitting out. Good to see he's not hurt. I was curious about that, but just a slow ramp up for him and a short summer impact in his preparation. And, of course, at 38, too, they're going to be careful with him. But I want to come in and talk about that. Which way would you go? Kornet, Horford? If anyone's going to love the Kornet route, it's going to be me. And I like it. I like the idea. So we'll see what happens on opening night. I'd have to imagine it'll be Horford on opening night, but maybe they'll surprise us. For Noa Dalzell, a lot of great work up from her from Minnesota on the WNBA Finals, SB Nation, for all that. And you got Boston coming up throughout the week. We'll have some post-game coverage of these games as well. I think it's just going to be me on the air, and Noah joining me as well. Sherrod will be in the mix for these games. No Jimmy. I don't believe John is in the mix for this weekend either. So join us after that game on Saturday night as well as Sunday night. A longer look at some of the younger guys, bench guys, I'm sure, on Sunday. But I think we'll see at least some starters on both sides with the Celtics-Sixers matchup right there. And that's just a day away. Again, go check it out. Tickets, Game Time, CLNS for $20 off your purchase. It was a good game to get into and see before the big money games start in the regular season. So go over there, see Yabusele, see maybe Embiid, Horford, all the regular guys for part of this game, and get a look at some of the younger guys too. And then use code CLNS to get $50 when you play $5 instantly at Prize Picks for this weekend's games. Go set your lineup, Prize Picks, run your game. That's it. Noa Dalzell, Bobby Manning. This has been the Garden Report, and we will talk to you tomorrow night.
Wait, Amit's got an outro for us, I think.
No, he doesn't.
He said he was going to work on an outro.
He had a phenomenal game.
Phenomenal game.
Horford's out. I think it's an option. That did not sound like a chair.
It was a freaking chair. It does sound like a chair.